He brought a continent to its knees. But the one thing he could never bring to its knees was himself. Drawn from history. Corsica, an island in the middle of the Mediterranean where the winds blow hard and travel is difficult. In 1769, a child was born there, Napoleon Bonaparte. The year he was born, France had just seized the island, so he came into the world on occupied soil. He was not fully French, nor entirely a free Corsican. His identity conflict began at birth. His father Carlo stayed close to the French administration to protect the family. His mother Letizia was stern, silent, libertarian. Napoleon's discipline came from his mother. His desire to rise came from his lowly position. At just 9 years old, he was sent to France, a small boy on the deck of a ship. Ahead of him, a country he did not know. For a child, this was not education. It was separation. Brienne military school, stone walls, aristocratic children, expensive uniforms. Among them, a thin boy with a heavy accent. They mocked him. Provincial, foreigner. Napoleon never answered them, but with every humiliation he made a promise to himself. One day he would stand above them all. While others slept at night, he studied mathematics, artillery calculations, distance, angle, wind. In his free time he read for hours, especially books about the life of Alexander the Great. Alexander had shaken the world before turning 30. Napoleon did not see this as a legend. He saw it as a target, and a thought began to grow inside him. I can do it too. At first that thought was a dream, then it became belief, and belief is the most dangerous power. When the French Revolution erupted, he was 20 years old. Paris stood on the brink of destruction. King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. Order collapsed, armies scattered. But within chaos there was something, a void. The city was under British control. The Republican forces were desperate. A young artillery officer named Napoleon proposed a risky plan. Let's place the cannons on the strategic hills controlling the harbor. Let's make the port unusable. Force the British to withdraw. At first they mocked him and looked down on him. But as days passed, pressure increased. The plan was accepted. It was implemented immediately. All night, the sound of cannons echoed. By morning, the harbor had fallen. Napoleon was swiftly promoted to brigadier general. But the real change happened inside him. For the first time, a system had bowed to his intellect. By 1795, royalists rose in Paris. The streets filled. The government panicked. Authority was given to Napoleon. He did not hesitate. He turned the cannons toward the crowd. Dozens of cannon blasts tore through the streets. Hundreds of insurgents were killed. Suddenly, everything fell silent. That day, Napoleon learned something. Power does not belong to the hesitant. It belongs to the one who decides and acts. In 1796, he took command of the army of Italy. His army was tired, hungry, hopeless. They were unpaid and undisciplined. Napoleon stood before them. You are poor, but your role in destiny is great. Then the great wars of Europe began, and here Napoleon's true genius emerged. Classical European generals were heavy, slow, predictable. Napoleon made unconventional decisions and acted fast. He divided his army into smaller corps. He isolated the enemy, crushed them one by one. While attacking on one front, he would suddenly appear on another. While his rivals planned for days over maps, he moved from victory to victory on the field. After the Italian campaign, France spoke only one name, Napoleon. Despite the glory and fame victory brought, he was restless. He was still trying to silence the voice inside him, foreigner. Perhaps all his rise, all his aggression was meant to silence that voice. But sometimes a man becomes the very thing he is trying to escape. Napoleon's power grew rapidly, and power became his identity. France had emerged from revolution, but remained unstable. The economy was fragile. Politics were corrupt. The people wanted a strong leader. One night, the coup of 18 Brumaire took place. The assembly was dissolved. Politicians were intimidated. The republic continued on paper, but real power now belonged to a single authority. Napoleon became first consul. He was not only fighting wars. Everywhere he went, he brought order. He reorganized the tax system, centralized education, established the central bank, and most importantly, the Napoleonic Code. Everyone would be equal before the law. Property would be protected. Freedom of religion would be recognized. These reforms laid the foundation of the modern state. Paris gathered in Notre Dame Cathedral for a ceremony. Pope Pius VII was there to crown Napoleon. Napoleon stepped forward. He took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it upon his own head. This act was a symbol. No one consecrated me. I took my own power. He was now Emperor of France. But Europe did not welcome this. A revolutionary officer becoming emperor was unacceptable. Soon, wars began again across Europe. 1805, Austerlitz. Russia and Austria stood against Napoleon with full force. They had numerical superiority. Napoleon deliberately appeared weak. He left his right flank exposed. The enemy, believing they saw weakness, attacked. They were exactly where he wanted them, exactly when he wanted them. Napoleon gave the order to attack with his hidden reserves. When the fog lifted, the French army had split the two empires at the center. The Battle of Austerlitz is still taught in military academies. That day, Napoleon did not just win a battle. He broke Europe's psychology. Europe was afraid. Then came Jena, Wagram, Ulm. Victories followed in chains. He made his brothers kings of Spain, Holland, Naples. He redrew Europe's map at a table. But the summit is lonely. Napoleon was now a figure everyone feared. But how many were truly close to him? His wife, Josephine. They loved each other deeply. But despite all attempts, they could not have children. And empires are not sustained by emotions, but by stability. The decision to divorce. A cold announcement. Politically rational. Humanly uncertain. Later, Napoleon married Marie-Louise to secure an heir. They had a son. The doubt about succession was gone. But the emptiness inside him grew. He turned his focus back to the world. Napoleon was no longer a soldier correcting the system. He was the system. And as systems grow, the margin for error shrinks. To subdue Britain, he launched the continental system. Europe's economy trembled. Merchants suffered. Spain revolted. Guerrilla warfare began. The French army sank into a swamp. Napoleon was still powerful, but the first cracks had formed. The peak is sometimes the moment of greatest blindness. Half of Europe was under his control, and a man who believes in his destiny may not see the line between risk and madness. In 1812, he approached that line. Napoleon was 43. Much of Europe was either his ally or subdued by fear, but one country still resisted: Russia. Tsar Alexander I began breaking the continental system. Trade with Britain continued. Napoleon saw this as betrayal. This was no longer economic. It was a challenge to his authority. And Napoleon took challenges personally. More than 600,000 soldiers, the Grande Armée, French, Germans, Poles, Italians. One of the largest armies in history. In June 1812, they entered Russia. Napoleon expected a swift victory, a few major battles, peace in Moscow. But the Russians did not fight. They retreated. They emptied cities, burned fields, destroyed supply depots. The land he sought to conquer turned to ashes before his eyes. As the army advanced, it seemed to win, but in truth, it was losing. Because this war was not fought against an enemy, but against time. Borodino, one of the bloodiest days in history. Cannons thundered for hours. Tens of thousands were lost. Did Napoleon win? Technically, yes. But it did not feel like victory, because the Russian army was not destroyed. It had merely retreated, a victory, but incomplete. Tsar Alexander did not ask for peace. Napoleon waited for weeks. Waiting was against his character. He was a man of speed and decision, but this time he hesitated. Then winter came. The cold did not just pierce bones, it crushed morale. Cannons were abandoned. Soldiers froze. Horses perished. Supplies ran out. The retreat was ordered, but this was not a planned withdrawal. It was survival. Soldiers froze to death. Rear guards were shattered. The roads filled with corpses. Of 600,000, fewer than 100,000 returned. Napoleon rode at the front, still upright, but the myth of his invincibility broke here. Europe saw it and realized the moment had come. Prussia, Austria, Russia, Britain, they united. This time he faced not a state, but a continent. Napoleon still fought with all his strength. His mind was still sharp, his maneuvers still fast, but his numbers were fewer, and the enemy was no longer afraid. The legend was defeated for the first time. Paris fell. Napoleon abdicated. He was exiled to Elba, a small island, a small palace. A man who once ruled continents was confined to a few kilometers, but something still burned inside him. Ambition. He refused to accept that destiny had written this as his end. Europe thought him finished. The Bourbon monarchy returned, but the people were not satisfied. Napoleon heard this, and something rare in history happened. A fallen emperor decided to return, risking death. With only a few hundred soldiers, a ridiculous number for an emperor. But Napoleon trusted something beyond numbers, the respect he had planted in men's hearts. It could have been suicide, or the boldest move in history. When he landed on French shores, troops were sent to arrest him. Guns were aimed. Napoleon calmly dismounted. He walked alone toward the rifles. "If you wish to kill your emperor, fire." A moment of silence. Then one soldier knelt, then another. An army bowed to one man's will. One by one they joined him. The people had not forgotten what he had achieved. Napoleon marched to Paris. The king fled. He was emperor again. But this time everything was different. This was not a rebirth. It was a final challenge. Europe did not wait. The Seventh Coalition formed. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia. They all agreed. This time it must end. June 1815, Belgium, Waterloo. Rain during the night turned the ground to mud. Cannon struggled to move. The attack was delayed. Hours passed. Napoleon watched the battlefield. His plans were still sharp, but time worked against him. Wellington's army resisted with its last strength. Then on the horizon, dust clouds appeared, the Prussian army. At that moment, Napoleon looked, and for the first time something was missing in his eyes. Belief. The French lines broke, the Imperial Guard retreated. And when the Guard retreats, the legend shatters. Napoleon left the battlefield. This was not escape, it was acceptance. He returned to Paris, abdicated for the second and final time. This time there was no applause. The exile was far harsher. St. Helena, a remote, windswept island in the middle of the Atlantic. No escape now, no return. He lived in a small house, dictated his memoirs, defended himself, left his version to history. The man who once shook Europe was now watched by a few British guards, his body confined to a small home, but his mind still wandered battlefields. Austerlitz, Borodino, Waterloo, and perhaps Brienne. Years passed. His health declined. He died at 51, believed to be stomach cancer. His last words were, "France, army, Josephine." No empire in that sentence. No power, only belonging. Napoleon conquered the world, but all his life he chased one thing: acceptance, to not be a foreigner. His intelligence made him great. His belief destroyed him. Napoleon's story is not just the rise and fall of an emperor. It is the story of limitless ambition, and ambition can raise a man to the summit, but it cannot decide how long he stays there. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe and leave a like. You can also write in the comments which historical topics you'd like to see next. See you in the next video.